All right, we're recording another episode. This is really, let me dial in my audio here. I got it pretty dialed in. If anyone has trouble listening or hearing, I apologize, but it'll get regulated before the end of this. So special thanks to all the sponsors. Head over to www.johnbartoloshow.com and check it out. I want to start with a great company that has done a phenomenal job during this panic and everything else, keeping their shelves stocked and keeping everybody in good standing, is Kenzies Optics. I had a long talk with Keith and Katie. They're awesome people. Love Kenzies Optics. Go check them out. I got, a special guest today that, he does some insanely innovative stuff, and there's a few people that come along in my journey through the firearms business that I really genuinely get impressed by what they're doing, what they're building, and we didn't get a chance to meet. We share a lot of mutual friends, and it was kind of interesting because I would cross paths with this person, literally be in the same room and not have the opportunity to meet them and chat with them. And I think that was a good thing, because sometimes you just feel like you don't get the time to pick their brain. But I finally got him on the phone. We talked for probably an hour and a half and got into some stuff, but I don't think we scratched the surface, because every time we start rapping, we can go 20, 25 minutes before we get anywhere. But I finally got the one and only Scott Volquartsen on. What's going on?
I'm good. How are you, John?
It's funny because I had such a relationship with Colby Pavlock through the years, and obviously Cheyenne to an extent. We've always been friendly and love the family and everything she's doing. She's been on the show. That we never kind of got a chance to really be in the same corner of the room and rap for a while, but more often than not, I would admire a lot of the stuff that you were doing from afar.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's crazy. It seems like it's a small industry, but at the same time,
and especially with the small degrees of separation, you're kind of like, I got to bump into this guy at some point in 8 or 10 years. But, so back up, because, tell everybody, let everyone know kind of how you got to this point. Like what made you want to get into this wacky industry, and what made you want to pursue this?
Well, I basically grew up in it because my dad started it, kind of as a part-time hobby in 74, I believe. And then he was basically a one-man shop through the 80s and into the mid 90s when I started working for him. So it was just something that I always expected to do. I think growing up, he never forced me into it. He let us choose our own path.
Yeah, but he was running it like a specialty shop, like a custom shop. You took it kind of to the next level.
So yeah, he was always, very innovative, very forward thinking. But he loved the actual gun part of it, not so much, as things started going into like the CNC world, that wasn't his game. He liked working on a manual mill, manual lathe, doing one-off type stuff, where we kind of took over. My brother and I took over in the early 2000s and then officially bought it from him in 2005. And that's when we started getting into more manufacturing. We grew from, I think at the time we had 3 or 4, basically it was all family, to now we're up over 25 employees. So yeah, my background is I went to school for tool and die, came back in 95 and started working for Dad.
Yeah.
And, and it's crazy how it's evolved, everything from, the way things used to have to be marketed the way he did it 30 years ago compared to what we do now.
Oh, believe me, I've seen it. It's crazy. It's funny you bring that up. I haven't really talked about that with anybody. When I worked for a company called Remcon, they're the only manufacturer of gas tubes pretty much in the entire gun business. If you want a gas tube, that's who you have to get it from. We would find in the drawers and stuff, and this company goes back to the 50s and 60s, you would find the old ad pamphlets, some of the old stuff from the different trade shows that they would go to and the different things that they would do. The industry is very funny like that. You know, so much has evolved, and we were talking about this a little bit before we went on air, just how the mindset of some people are, like you said, you know, some people it's not their flavor to do certain things or to approach things a certain way, or like we said, when it starts to get into the CNC world or digital, it's not their cup of tea. And the gunsmith, and, you know, coincidentally, we talked about this too, Scott. It was like, I don't look at myself as a millennial because, like, as I said to you, I never had a cell phone in high school. I was still part of that generation that grew out of it. I'm still a little old school in the sense that I learned a little bit of the gunsmithing business from Business End Customs. Lou down there doing the 1911s. He's very by hand. Everything is done by hand. So, you know, as I learned more and more, I like to think I'm kind of the last of the old guard in some ways, learning some of this stuff. And you know, that's not a bad thing. It's you know, doing that custom work by hand is really a lost art. I kind of wish some companies like Kimber would still do some stuff like that instead of using MIM parts, but that's a different story. But keep going.
You know, and you forget, you know, we've gotten so used to anytime we have a question, you just go Google it, you know, but like,
right. That's a good point too.
You know, I kind of transitioned through that phase, but, you know, I remember when, if you wanted to learn something, you either had to go find it in a book, you had to find a magazine article,
or do it,
or you had to find a gun and just, you know, do the work yourself and learn that way. You know, you couldn't just go watch a YouTube video of somebody else doing it, or, you know, Google a million different results.
Mm-hmm.
It was a completely different thing, you know, which is why, like you said, I wish more companies would kind of come back to that. You know, and a lot of things we do, we'll have people tell us, well, that's inefficient. There's much faster ways to do that. There's more economical ways to do that, which we're well aware of. But at the same time, in our opinion, it sacrifices quality. And that was something, you know, that was something we learned from Dad, was everything he always did was over the top. You know, if he was going to build a table, it was going to be a table that could hold 2,000 pounds. When all you're going to do is assemble a frame on it.
Right. Overbuilt.
You know, but
yeah.
Everything was overbuilt. But it was a mentality. I didn't know it at the time, but it's a mentality that kind of got ingrained in us, that I basically approach everything I do in life with that same mentality now.
Yeah, it's kind of a lost. Thank God people did think that way, because I look at some of these skyscrapers and I'm like, how are some of them still standing? Some of these buildings. I grew up in New England, so everything's 300 years old. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I'm looking at stuff like, you know, I don't know how this building is still even here. But, you know, you take over the brand and get involved, and you build out something, you know, I think that's really not only respectful of the past and innovative, but it's very forward thinking. And one of the reasons I've always admired what you do and have done from afar is you've taken a lot of concepts that, you know, aren't necessarily brand new or totally out of the box, but you've made them better, and you've done design cues and done certain stuff that's just not only better. And then one of the smartest plays you did and genius things is you incorporate a very young, energetic feel into the marketing by bringing in some nice younger shooters. There's less drama, there's less headaches. They grow into the brand as you grow, and they tend to stay with you forever. And you stay in that rimfire space where, you know, it's really an area that you can dominate, you know, and you can really crush it. And I've always looked at the things that you do as like, wow, you know, sometimes I'm like, why is this motherfucker staying in this space? Why doesn't it, you know, but you really dialed it in, you know what I mean? You really hit it home. Why was it that space, and what made you, even in the marketing side, you know, take that approach that you took? Because you really, you know, struck it gold with Cheyenne and Colby and some of the folks.
Yeah, so we started doing a lot with the 22s back in like the early to mid 90s, building up the 1022s, doing all that stuff. But the reason for that is, you know, there was a lot of people, you know, even back then getting into the AR market, building 1911s. But the one thing we looked at is regardless of which caliber you like or what your passion is in the industry, it seems like everybody has a 22. So, because we were a small shop, we had to narrow down what we were doing in order to make it a little more efficient. And as that grew, we realized the 22 is a great way, or any rimfire is a great way to introduce new shooters, which kind of led us to the path of Colby and Cheyenne and a few other young shooters. And, the one thing, like with the shooters we have, like the Cheyenne's family, Colby's family, it's crazy, because we start with them so young, we become friends with their entire family,
of course.
Cheyenne's sister, her brother, Colby and his mom, it becomes much more than just you go shoot our product. It becomes more of a relationship type thing where.
Well, it's so smart too. I'll be devil's advocate for a second. If you know anything about some of these families, you don't become a shooter prodigy, and your family isn't from the gun industry. Colby's essentially a prodigy, and when it comes to shooting, I mean the kid wins almost everything he competes in, and his mother Gail's been around the industry for a long time. It's so you're getting a lot of cooks in the kitchen, which isn't a bad thing when you're young and you're growing and you need a lot of energy behind it. It's kind of like you were taking things to the next level from what your dad did, and you get a lot of good people around the brand that are involved in the brand. A lot of people start singing your praises and supporting you, which is a good thing, which is what you want in marketing, right? Word of mouth, developing that type of heat. I call it heat. I'm a huge wrestling fan, so I call it cheap heat. You get a lot of you get a lot of cheap heat. You know what I mean? And the cheap heat's what we're all after. How do you get a little heat around this? Well, you bring in when it's a family affair. What do I always say? Many hands make light work, right, Scott? So it makes life a lot easier. So you bring in these younger folks. They got a lot of cool ideas. They're dominating. They're winning. And not only that, they're marketing gold. And it's a lot of fun for you. You start hitting home runs. And, the real question with you isn't that the stuff is innovative? Isn't that the stuff isn't exciting? It's where it goes from here. And I look across the landscape, and there's a handful of super innovative guys left out there. I look at folks like yourself. I look at Glenn Seekins. I look at certain people out there that I feel are doing some really cool stuff. And, there's some I don't know about. I can name, I could sit here all day and name people I really love their stuff. I love some of the stuff going on in the Marlin Custom Shop. When you look out there for inspiration, who do you look at and you're like, it can be way outside of your space, the rimfire. Who do you look at and you're like, geez, I really like what they're doing?
Good question.
I look at like stuff like, what the like I mentioned, the Marlin Custom Shop, what they're doing with some of the lever actions, kind of jazzing them up and doing some different things, because I love lever action. And then I look at like, I really enjoy sometimes going by and peeking at some of the stuff coming out of Turkey. There's some cool stuff coming out of Turkey right now, different things. I'm interested to see how they evolve in the plastics market and what they do in that polymer space, and even the Canics come a long way. It's getting interesting over there. And then, there's some stuff I kind of have my eye on, and then there's some stuff I'll get into that I don't. But who do you look at, even just walking around the show, and you're like, I dig what they do?
Yeah, to be honest, I wish I got a chance to walk around the show more, but, there's a lot of different, I'm trying to think offhand who.
I'd say like in the optics space, like I'll give you another one just as I'm sitting here thinking, like stuff like is Primary Arms is doing for the cost they're doing it for, like $100 red dots that, like, I literally took their red dot and was banging it off the floor at SHOT Show, and the thing held up. They probably thought I was nuts, but I was like, for $100 if it takes this kind of beating, you know what I mean? There's some stuff out there that I'm impressed by. I think the soft goods market has grown leaps and bounds in the last few years. But yeah,
the one area I've been impressed with is primarily, within the rimfire space, a lot of guys are getting into like the NRL 22, like the precision long range stuff. There's a couple different companies that are doing some really neat things, like with some different stock and, different soft goods for like rimfire rifles that are currently out there.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think I think the ammo space is one a lot of guys will dive into too in the coming months. So I'm kind of, I guess more interested than anything. And you and I were talking about this a little bit the other day in terms of like where the market's going. It's going to be interesting to see who dives in that over the coming months and year, because I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes. Like, hey, we got to get in this space a little bit, so that'll be fun to watch, and it's always fun to watch.
And something I'll be watching a lot of is what companies, take the lead in working with a lot of these new shooters that are going to be coming through the industry or through the market.
Yeah, we're heading towards an interesting time, Scott. It's going to be very interesting in terms of, we're in really, I haven't thought of it in this context. We're in really a very, very unique space. We aren't fighting as many wars anymore. People are coming home, which tends to cause a purging in the market over the next year or two in terms of foot traffic and people, because what tends to happen is if you have a large crop of Leos retire and you return from many foreign wars, everybody wants to dive in the gun space. You get a huge influx of new instructors, new people. Everybody's an expert on firearms, right? So we get that. And that kind of pours into the market. Lately, the last couple of years, we've seen that kind of drip out of the market, which is a good thing in so many ways, because people realize it's a business and it's just a whole different animal, and we could spend all day on that. But at the end of the day, I think we're marching towards a unique time in the business where we've talked about this for a long time. Everybody's been running around saying the purge in the market. Well, if people don't handle their inventories properly, they don't buy properly, coming out of this, you're going to see a real purge. You're going to see some companies just kind of drip out of the space. And we mentioned before the show started, some companies that don't, aren't going to SHOT Show, or people that don't participate like they used to, which I think the whole NSSF thing with them splitting SHOT Show up on a side note is so fucking dumb. But that's a side note. I think that's the dumbest one. And I'm having them on Tuesday, and I'm going to ask Larry what the thinking is in that. I mean, what do you think about that? I think it's the dumbest fucking idea ever.
Are you referring to splitting it into a separate building?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to see how that goes.
You're abstaining. You're abstaining from the question.
They pushed hard to get exhibitors into that new space.
I don't get it.
And let's just put it this way: we did not bite on trying to get moved over to that new space.
No one's going to go there.
No. And that's my feeling. It's going to be an afterthought. You're going to walk people are creatures of habit, in my opinion. They're going to go walk the show. They're going to go to the booths they normally see. And at least in my opinion, that second location is going to be an overflow if you get all of your other work done in the first couple of days.
I don't even want to waste another minute talking about it. It's going to be an abomination. It's going to be an abortion. And listen, to everybody out there that thinks I'm an asshole, I'm going to give them a chance to talk on Tuesday. I'm going to have, a couple of bigwigs chime in, and I'm going to ask them straight up. I'm going to be like, what the fuck are you guys thinking? And if you think I'm lying, go tune into the episode after Tuesday. So and
I'll be honest. I get where they're coming from. They're trying to expand the show.
Yes,
but I also think there's a lot of. It seems like this term's getting overused right now. There's a lot of non-essential exhibitors. I think that.
You're not wrong. Keep going.
That get into our show, or not our show, but into the SHOT Show. That even as I walk by sometimes, and I've been to over 25 SHOT Shows. It might be an interesting product or booth, but I'm like, I have no idea why they're exhibiting here.
Scott, here's the thing. They have the space. Upstairs is barely used half the time. And they have that dealer show that, the supplier show, which is a good show, actually. The supplier show is actually the most underrated part of SHOT Show, by the way, to everybody listening. If you get a chance to check out the supplier show, check it out. But that supplier show clears out. What I've said for years, when that show clears out, why don't they give exhibitors, like you're saying, periphery people, a chance to set up for a day or two? I don't get it. I think
they do that now.
They do that in the hallway. It's that like that
Okay,
hallway thing.
Because there's like that one day, I don't remember. They have a name for,
but they
like,
have the space. I mean, the Glock parties one night, they have the space up there. There's huge ballrooms up there. Give me a break. This is just a ploy for them to open up another. They're trying to fight a war on two fronts. You know, they're trying to open up another front so they can sell that space and keep selling space and keep selling space. It's an old model. And if we're going to get into this now, we can get into it. It's an old model because the NSSF and the NRA, if you look at their model is built on people paying an amount of money for something received back. Their model, they don't do any real innovative media stuff at all, which is why they're in the pickle they're in. They're not evolving. Go look at the guys who are in charge of the media department. They're 100. You know, some of the people that are in charge of, they have no forward-thinking mindset. Like the fact, right, and I'm going to get into it, Scott, because we opened the third rail here. The fact that, for everybody out there, the third rail is the third rail on a subway. If you grew up in the city and you touched the third rail, you were dead. They opened up the third rail of, you have this giant entity like NRA, and then this COVID thing happens, and why you wouldn't offer free memberships, have tutorials. Instead, you have emails going out talking about what Wayne LaPierre thinks. I don't care what Wayne LaPierre thinks. And I don't think you do either. And I don't think half the shooters do. I think that they need to take a focus to, like, the NSSF is in charge of shots. So let me not get off on that tangent. But the NSSF, like last year, and I brought this up, I've talked to them. They said, we're going to do a show and we're going to do a panel on how to market on Facebook. You can't market on Facebook. Drop it. Why don't you do a class on TikTok? And then they opened up what was it they did? We're going to do a panel and we're going to teach people how to work with ambassadors. The amount of people that I had message me, and they've never even heard of any of these people. I have notes a mile long for them. But as a manufacturer, I have to ask you, because you pay dues to be a part of SHOT Show. It's a valid question for you. Do you feel the NSSF is delivering on what you need as a manufacturer? And don't be political and give me something. Give me some meat on the bone here, Scott. What do you think? Because I've talked to you offline about it. I mean, what do you genuinely feel? And I know they're trying to get it right. Mark, for the record, Mark Olivia on the political side, just like Jason we met on the political side of the NRA, they do a good job. They don't do a bad job. They are fighting fights that people don't see. And my hat is off to them. But I've had conversations. But what do you think?
I think the thing that I see with them, and I, like I said, I'm a fan of the NSSF, but I think sometimes they try to go in too many different directions where they should almost, kind of like we decided with Rimfire was our direction. They need to figure out what exactly they want to do. I love some of their programs, the first shots and all those different things, but I think they need to figure out what their first priority is and make sure they are doing that as well as possible before maybe getting into some of these other areas. So like when it comes to the SHOT Show, we've had very good shows lately. I actually think the SHOT Show, even though the attendance was down this past year, we had a very good show. But I think like you said before, the model has to evolve to where we're at as an industry now. And I think we have to be forward thinking enough to know that trade shows in general are going to be something completely different 5 and 10 years from now, at least in my opinion.
They're going to be virtual. The days of having to listen, I go to these NAB, I go to these different trade shows, CES, and I've tried to explain to brands like yourself who are very hard-headed, some, not you person, but some brands, they're very hard-headed, and they still think everything is going to be about the gun. And the mistake we've made as an industry for so long, and you and I have gotten into this, is it's not about the gun. And I've said it over and over and over. It's not about the firearm. I look at brands like Red Bull, Monster, I've said it repeatedly on the show, different action sports. It's got to stop being about the gun. It has to start to be about the people. And the world functions just fine without celebrities and these stupid fucking award shows and the Kardashians and all this other bull. The world functions just fine. And the world will be fine coming out of this. And what we have to make it about is the people involved in the industry, the people like yourself, the people out there that are great people. And one of the failures that I've seen over the years is this is a really simple system of change. Is there needs to be people put in charge. Like, okay, so I'll take you back. You know this because you're an insider in the business. 7-8 years ago, every marketing department hired who to run their marketing department? They hired advertisers, ad buyers, because that's what the industry was. It was buy ads, right? If you ask Daniel Defense, it's still in that space. They buy fucking urinal cakes. It's buy ads. Anything that you can buy with your name on it is a good thing. And that's how you get market share. So we had Recoil, we had all these different things. Everybody bought ads. When that started to die, every company panicked and they fired all their high, price ad people running their marketing departments, and they started bringing in the photographers because Instagram came in, right? And it was all about the photo. And it took years for the mindset to shift. And, ambassadors were always there, pro shooters, whatever you want to call it. I have the hiccup, so I apologize, everyone. Whatever you want to call it. But you have now this evolution where I've said to a lot of brands, as part of my consulting, you have to start bringing in some creators, and you have to bring in people with a creative mindset that can create a system for how you create media. I've been on the phone with people that make far bigger salaries than I've ever made in this business, and I ask them very simply, what's your content creation strategy? How do you create content? How do you do it? And they can't answer me. And it tells me they're basically doing mag dumps in a desert, or they say we have a newsletter. And there's no plan. There's no plan. I'm on the NRA. You take, for example, I'll pick on the NRA because everyone does anyway. So I'll just look at them for a second. It's what we have. You have a letter from Wayne LaPierre about Corona. You have NRA Legal Facts, which is always up here. You have Stand Up for Freedom, which I don't even know what the hell is that about. And then you have NRA Women. You have nothing that says, there's not one single scrolling thing right now on March 29th that says, did you recently purchase a firearm? Scott, not one thing.
And to me, that's a mistake because, like we talked about earlier.
It's not a mistake. It's a failure. It's a total, use the F word. It's a total failure. And the issue I have with it, it's not, people say, John, you're just picking on the NRA. I'm not picking on the NRA. I love Billy there. I love Jason there. There's a lot of good people there. The issue I have with it is if I was walking in that building and I was an executive, I would go into that marketing room with a flamethrower. Because I would say, all we do is complain that we can't raise funds. And they bang people over the head like you, Scott, that supposedly have the deep pockets, and say, buy a yellow jacket, donate 47 guns. And you have a golden chance now as an entity to build your membership. So if I'm you, and I'm one of the big money guys, and I'm using air quotes, big money guys, I'm pissed.
Well, you're right. It's a failure because we as an industry spend all of our time trying to bring new people into the industry.
Exactly.
They're coming in waves right now
with
people buying guns for the first time. And a lot of them have no idea where to turn to for resources. So if you're a first-time gun buyer, more than likely you've heard of the NRA, and that's probably where you're going to turn to learn something.
And what they should be offering right now is free tutorials. I'd be even offering free RSO classes. Make everybody an RSO. Why not start a campaign right now? We want to make everybody an RSO. Why not?
And even to take that a step further, as we're teaching people to be RSOs or, let's make sure we're reminding everybody that's currently in the industry to welcome all these new shooters.
Yeah, but that takes someone that can speak out, and it comes back to who they hire in marketing. And they went from the ad buyers to the photographers, and the people they hire, I mean, they don't, who's going to do the video? The NRA is lost right now. And I mean, here's part of the issue. I'm going to tell you the biggest issue, Scott. We talked about this. I'm going to come right out and say it because I don't care. Is when your spokesperson is someone who's never worked in the industry, who's never cashed a check, never worked a mill, never had their father sell them the business. How can they even have that conversation? Could you ever in a million years picture Dana Loesch having that conversation?
Yeah, and that's where it becomes, I think where we're based on models that worked 20, 30, 40 years ago, but maybe not.
We'll get a fancy spokesperson, and that person is essentially a debater, right? They're good at debates. They're good at that stuff. They wrote a book, but they don't understand the nature of the business and what the business needs right now. How many FFLs has one of their spokespeople walked in and had a conversation with them? And look, I'm not here to pick on these entities. We're talking about your brand, how you get to the next level, things you see out in the marketplace. You're a leader in the industry. You're an innovator. You got tons of young shooters in your flock. You're going to inherit this. I'll be dead and buried. I'll be disappeared by then. But your shooters, like I've said to Cheyenne, it's, Cheyenne and I were talking, I know you listened to the episode, and she's one of your shooters, and you could sense the moment of pause in her voice when I said, you're going to inherit this. This is going to be yours. So I know everybody likes to play it politically straight and not have an opinion. But at the end of the day, if we don't have an opinion, we're back at the same place. We're back at zero. So, as a brand, as you try to harness these new customers coming in, you pay dues to the NSSF. You pay dues to these entities. You support these entities. It's important now to speak up. I know the NSSF is pushing, and I'm sure by the time I have them on, they're going to have a lot out there because I've been seeing what they're putting out there now. They're getting proactive because I'm sure of it. After my conversation with Mark, he went in there and he lit some fires. But it's really important right now. Now's the important time. How would you do it if you were in charge for a day?
I think the biggest thing is somehow have to have the resources available to these new shooters. And more importantly, I think what maybe needs to be done is tutorials for a lot of the FFL dealers that you referenced on how to, because a lot of these new people, I think, are going to go back. They're going to trust that FFL dealer as the person that's their go-to. Kind of like back in the day where you had a trusted mechanic that they could tell you anything about your car and that's what you would believe. There's a lot of these new shooters. They're going to expect the dealers or the stores that they went to be able to answer their questions and teach them what they need to know. And I don't know if a lot of dealers are equipped to do that. They're great with guys that have somewhat of a familiarity with the industry or with firearms. I see it all the time on social media where you may have a new shooter that's simply trying to ask a question and they almost get blasted because they don't know the exact term they're trying to ask.
Oh, that's systemic. We've seen that 100 times. We talked about that.
Yeah, and but I think as an industry, we may have to, and I've said it before, is we're always trying to gain new shooters, but then what happens is a lot of us or a lot of people in the industry work from almost like a scarcity mindset.
Well, we think somebody else gets what we want, and they're going to take it from us. But we
correct.
We talked about this. Like, for example, when I first was breaking into the business, I pushed a lot of fitness, different genres, action sports into the industry. And Scott, I'll never forget this. I brought this story up a few times on this show. I was going back and forth with a holster manufacturer, and the person has since blocked me on Facebook and Instagram and, got mad at me. They said, what's with all these bodybuilders coming into shooting? And I said, so if they want to buy a holster, you don't want their money? And this is a large company. And they said, well, I didn't say that. I'm like, so what are you saying? And we have a mindset of like, we're going to play gatekeeper. Only the most overused term is only legit people. What's legit? I don't understand. I've been searching for this definition for 10 plus years in the business. Is the money green? Do they want to learn? Because I've never met a manufacturer that's turned away someone's money.
No, and that's and I guess I'll ask you this, something that I see too, with trying to cross over into, because we've done the same thing with some of our ambassadors. They are way more known in the fitness space than they would ever be like in our space. But it's a crossover that I think is there. But I think sometimes we're guilty too, and I guess I'll defer to you on this, is as we're trying to bring new people in, we want them to go from 0 to 100, that they have to be 100%, pro 2A, pro everything that we're about, but we're not willing to let them like ease their way into it.
Evolve naturally. Now,
yeah,
I say this.
And I think in turn, we sometimes turn people off when we take them from that 0 to 100 too fast.
I say this. Most people got into shooting from the outside. It wasn't in their blood. They weren't born into it. It wasn't a part of their fabric. Most people get into it because of a story. I had Dana Lynn Bailey on the show, Rob Bailey's wife, and she's a fitness person. She's a competitor in all things. Grew up playing sports in Pennsylvania. I would say wasn't not in the gun industry, but wasn't in it. And she had an experience with a mountain lion, and it shifted her thinking a bit. And it starts with a story, but is she ready to, start going bang, bang and all this stuff with fire? Not necessarily, but I had her on the show. We talked through it, and it starts with a conversation. The problem in the industry is a lot of owners, I'm not saying you, a lot of manufacturers, and I did a deck on this. It's published on LinkedIn. I publish all my decks. I put a lot of stuff out there for free. It probably costs me more jobs. I've given away more $1 million ideas than I've kept for myself, definitely. But it's on the difference between an ambassador and an influencer. And most companies don't understand the difference because they've never been explained it. It's never been laid out to them. And when you start to understand the differences and where the puzzle pieces fit, you and I both know this. I'm going to speak very honestly. The manufacturing side of the firearms industry is 100% at fault with some of the problems that we have in terms of managing ambassadors and influencers, because they anoint false gods. And they do that vis-a-vis, allowing people to be the spokespeople or ambassadors of the industry as a whole, but they really don't come from the industry. They're what we call like 2A advocates. And they don't understand the nuts and bolts of the business. And what I say a lot of times to folks is when you're building out your program, I look at your program as one of the best ones out there because you've harnessed the power of the young shooter effectively. And, it's not necessarily about following. It's about family and about building a concept. And you probably just lack the resources in building to really, truly harness it. Like I would have Cheyenne writing blogs. I would have Colby writing blogs. I would have all kinds of crazy shit happening every day. And if you pay people well and you take care of them, like you take someone, if I was like, say, a young Colby or Trenton Matsuzaka or some of these guys out there, Dakota Overland, Cheyenne, and you pay them a decent wage and you say, I want, a blog a week. I want a video a week I can put on the website. You would have an SEO machine. But the problem is, and I've said this to companies, is a lot of brands in that $3 to $5 million range, upwards of 10 million, they can't wrap their head around paying some people a good wage to do the job. And then they don't want to hire a brand manager to oversee it and to get it done effectively. So it falls flat on its face. It kind of hits the skids. And they don't understand necessarily how to build out a proper program. And a lot of what I do is I'll look at this stuff and I'll be like, you have all the tools. You're just not building the program out properly. And if the program is built out properly, the sky's the limit on what you can accomplish and what you can do as a brand. And you look at brands that have harnessed that. The problem, across the board in the industry is we just get obsessed over what's legit, what isn't, who, and we're stuck. We're fixated on Instagram. We're super fixated on Instagram. Well, there's a great big world out there. And I try to tell companies the second most used search bar in the entire internet is YouTube. And more often than not, when you go into these manufacturers, Scott, and I'll ask you the question, and you ask them, where is your largest audience? And they'll say Instagram, or they'll say our newsletter. And then I'll say, okay, who runs your social media and who runs your newsletter? And they'll bring in like their nephew, Billy. Or I won't use Billy. It's a bad name because I know someone named Billy that runs a large entity for social media. So they bring in their nephew, Todd. And he's like a 24-year-old kid right out of school. So I said, I always say, you mean to tell me the head of your social media marketing, which is your largest audience, is run by the person you pay the least? Where does that mindset come from? And I guarantee that's not how it's done at SIG. I guarantee that's not how it's done at Springfield. I guarantee that's not how it's done at some of the larger brands that are getting it right in so many ways. And I more often than not, I find myself sitting in the room and I say, you need to start listening to Todd or Billy and stop listening to everyone else that's a genius in the room. That's the dichotomy. That's the problem. That's the choke point in the business right now. And until we get to a point where people understand and respect building these other entities and building these other platforms, because I'm going to tell you right now, we saw magazines die. Cable TV is dying. It may be on its last legs now because we don't have sports. You take sports out of cable TV, it's done. I mean, shit. YouTube.
If there wasn't for sports, I would not have TV.
Yeah. So in our lifetime, in yours and mine, we're going to see cable TV really come down to reality and start to die. But the reality is you can cut the cord now and have all the stuff that you want vis-a-vis YouTube or Amazon. And if you think for 1 second, Captain Moneybags over at Amazon, Bezos, isn't pumping all kinds of money into streaming, why a lot of these companies have not got into streaming, I won't understand. Now, I know part of the reason, they have the ability, they have the means. SIG totally has the ability and means. But they're never going to make somebody the star. Because then that means anointing somebody and making them the star. And the only person the industry's made a star, which is interesting to me, are people that have never worked in the firearms business. They wrote a book or they're a 2A advocate or whatever. And it's kind of puzzling to me. It's always been very puzzling and confusing. Now, how you fix it, it starts with the manufacturers. You have to get a manufacturer, and I'll pick on you because you're on the show, to come in and take a very large interest in getting it right and getting it right over time and building a system. Just taking a photo with the gun isn't enough anymore. I know you don't think it's enough. It's not enough. And stemming into new areas and new spaces and new places is the lifeblood of what we do. It really is. And too many times, more often than not, we abandon going in these new directions out of fear, and we run back to what we know. And what we know is mag dumps in a desert or shooting fast. And I had Clint Smith on, and Clint Smith said it. He said, fast doesn't equal proficient. Let me give you the exact quote he used. And it stuck with me. He said, some people equate speed with competency. But I also think we have a lot of great people in the shooting industry, and we don't do a good enough job getting a voice behind all of them. You take my show, for example. Pick on my show, okay? I have a lot of diverse people on my show. It's not a 1911 or a Glock 19 show. It's a show where I bring on politicians, I bring on pro shooters, I bring on all different walks of life. And I get them to talk about their love for shooting or the shooting sports. And I try to explain to them what I see out there, what I think is going on, or what I think is, the trend in the industry. And we have a conversation. It's tailor-made for, something like the NRA or some, it's a perfect template. I never for one second think I'm the smartest guy in the room, but I also think that this is something that they could be doing or something that somebody else could be doing. And it would add a voice to everything that's going on, but we fail, and companies do, the hardest thing I've said to so many people, the hardest thing in the world to do is to take a $3 to $5 million company and get them to realize the value in actually paying people what they're worth. I had a friend say to me, literally, who has a $3 to $5 million company in the business, say, I want to hire a marketing director, but I only want to spend about 45 or 50 grand. I go, well, that's not a marketing director. Hire your nephew. That's and why do you think that is? Why do you think that block is there? I know why. It's because you just started making money as an owner at that price point. You started paying yourself a little salary, and you don't want to pay somebody more than you.
And it's, I do not feel this way, but I've talked to other owners that, it's tough for them to justify that marketing position because
they don't see
if you hire somebody else to run a machine, you can say they're going to work this many hours and I'm going to make this much money.
Manufacturer mindset.
Correct. However, and we try to be forward thinking with our marketing. We actually have a video series we've been working on, very similar to what you were just talking about. It's where it's some fairly well-known people, but they just talk about what got them into shooting, why they want to shoot, and different things. And even doing that, as we started putting the money into it, I initially got cold feet. I'm like, is anybody going to care?
That's a different.
Yeah. But then we, and even so a couple different things to touch on what you said. There's one, I think the one thing that can't be lost is to build relationships with people and not just, we try to do that with anybody we work with is we want it to be a relationship, not just a transactional, we'll pay you, you market our product for us. Because I feel like regardless of where the marketing platform is, whether it's Instagram, becomes TikTok, YouTube, whatever it is, good people will transcend into whatever market that is.
You're right. You're onto something.
And what I was going to say, and even there, and that's why we've been working with Cheyenne to work on our TikTok page.
And what I was going to add to it is think of it like this. Everybody says wow, Vortex, one of the brands in the last 15 years has managed to grow leaps and bounds. And I just had Ruben on the other day. And I agree with that. And I don't think there's a person in the industry that wouldn't agree with that. But look at what they have their hands in. Podcasts, Vortex Nation. Look at the blend of ambassadors. Look at how they
created a lifestyle.
Of course. One of the things I'll come out and say this publicly. One of the things I did was I started my guest list, and I have the names and addresses and stuff of many of my guests, and I have them in my phone, and that's my Rolodex is a good Rolodex. And I take pride in that. I'm a big relationship driven guy, and I like connecting people, and I do it all the time. It's something I take pride in. Now, I look out there in the space. the only two companies that have ever asked me to harness my Rolodex that are part of the show were Quest Nutrition and Monster, and both of which are billion-dollar brands. Billion.
And Quest has only been around for what, 10 years?
And it sold for $1.2 billion. Is there a reason they're billion-dollar brands? It's because they get the little things right. The little things. And in our industry, we don't see value in things, but we have no data sample. It's like saying, I don't see any value in aspirin because I've never taken it. Well, it's been around for 100 years, and I think it works. And it's, and we laugh because it's doing the little things. Like right now, coming back to the NRA and NSSF, Mark said, what do you think we need to do? I said, I think you need a 1-800 number up on your website yesterday for the FFLs and for the manufacturers. 2 separate numbers. Because you want to become the conduit for them looking for resources. But they don't know what to do because all they know to do, to your point about the button pusher in the manufacturing, all they know to do is to hire someone that can pick up the phone and ask for money. That's all they know how to do. And we'll give you a free bag or we'll give you 10% off a booth. That's all they know. So right now they're like, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do here? I'll tell you, it's really simple. Do a pop-up on your page. Are you an FFL? Do you have questions right now? Call this number. And then what happens when you call that number? You gather pedigree information about what's going on out there. You gather data. And then you're able to take that data to the next FFL and to the next FFL and to the next FFL. Okay? The same thing with the NRA. If you offered right now, hey, free RSO course online. They offer it online already. It already exists, Scott. Sign up now and we'll give you a free 1-year NRA membership. The next 2,000 people, 20,000 people, whatever. Take our RSO course online and you get a free 1-year membership. What is the loss in that?
There's absolutely nothing lost. It just requires people to think differently than we have for 30 years.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. Have you been in a gun shop in the last 10 years that now doesn't have a TV in it?
No.
Streaming, why they don't have a streaming channel is beyond my knowledge. Beyond. I can't wrap my head around it. But that requires effort. That requires time. And it's not going to happen when you bring in people, like why, like I'll ask a better question. Let me pick on my podcast. Okay. Why doesn't the NRA have a podcast channel? Think about that. Is that a scary thought?
That is a scary thought.
Why don't they have a channel that's like NRA shows? Why don't they? The reason,
and that's where I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that's where, you were even asking me before, like, who do I look to or what other things do I look at? A lot of times I look outside of our industry, like you were discussing Monster, Quest. There's so many examples like that where they got to where they're at by looking at stuff brand new, bringing in new things where I think, and I've said this to a lot of different people, so much of our marketing in our entire industry is 10 years behind every other sector out there.
So true.
And that's not to pick on our industry in any way. It's just we have to evolve and we haven't done a very good job of it.
But how do we fix it? Because a lot of people say, oh, John, you're just complaining or you're not having, I had a good friend say to me, you're not having a constructive conversation. And I said, the fuck are you talking about? I invited them on the show. You can talk about it. Anyone can talk about it. I invited the NSSF. I invited the NRA. Come on. And I'm not talking about, to everybody out there, Scott, yeah, my side, anyone. We're not talking about the government side. The government side does do some good work. I know that for a fact. They're suing California right now. They're hustling. The Govy side does do the work. The problem is right now, the marketing side is nowhere. In my opinion, they're nowhere. Just my opinion. You know, we're going to have the largest number of NICS checks in history come out in what, Scott, 2 days? Largest ever. What did we do to capture that? What are you paying dues for to capture that? That's what I want to know. You know? How about a panel of new gun owners? Like, why isn't the NRA searching high and low or NSSF to find a panel of 10 new gun owners? I don't know the answer to it. There's not one. Let me lay this out to you. At SHOT Show, the NSSF does classes for dealers. There's not one class on TikTok. You just brought up. There's not one class on podcasting. There's not one class on, well, they did a class on developing ambassadors and influencers. I've never heard of some of the people on the panel. But other than Di Mueller, really, I don't know anyone on the panel. But the hell do I know?
Well, and my wife would laugh if she heard me say this, because I feel like every time I start a sentence, if I heard this on a podcast or I was listening to this podcast. But I honestly feel like podcasts are one of the best ways that we can. You know, it's the one platform where you can hear people talk for more than just 30-second snippets that you hear on a news channel.
Yeah, and
it's where
you're absolutely right. I know you're absolutely right.
You know, and I've heard politicians on podcasts say they enjoy it because it's the one time they can actually talk where it's not a panel of 10 people with everybody yelling at each other and over each other, and nothing ever gets said of substance. So, I mean, in my opinion, I think podcast, like you said, though, you know, it can't just be podcast of just gun tech talk a lot of times.
Oh, yeah, 1911.
It needs to be more centered on the lifestyle of it and who's doing it. You know, and that's something that we've tried approaching a lot of is I love competition shooting. I love being a part of competition shooting as our company. I'm a very competitive guy. So yes, I love when Colby wins or Cheyenne wins or whoever. When the world title.
When doesn't Colby win? That's the better question.
But at the same time, if they weren't good people and good kids, we would not be associated with them. But outside of that competition world, what we've been trying to market to is those families, you know, bringing in kids to shoot, wives to shoot, first-time shooters, whatever it may be, and making it not this big, intimidating thing to be a part of.
Mm.
You know, I think we, you know, discussed it before you started recording, you know, kind of like even in the fitness world, sometimes people go to a gym and they're intimidated for the first time, and whoever works with them that first time could make or break them ever coming back to the gym.
100%.
I think the same thing happens in our industry. If, you know, you go try to learn from a guy and all he wants to do is show you how well he can shoot, how fast he can shoot, how accurate he can shoot.
How big his dick is.
Yeah, that's not going to make that person say, hey, I can't wait to get back to the range.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can work with that shooter, let them have fun and, you know, teach them what they need to know or help them with pointers where they're constantly getting better. Who doesn't want to be a part of that?
The $1 million question is the $1 million answer is until the larger entities step up and, you know, develop and take a larger role in developing the right people. And there's some great people out there. Like, how about this? Let me ask you a question. How about this? If the NSSF asked you tomorrow, hey, we'd like to put a panel of owners together that have, over the course of a year, we want to do a 1 hour segment with owners across the industry. Scott, would you be interested in doing a 1 hour stream with the NSSF that we're going to put on our YouTube page as like a From the Owners table? Would you do it?
Absolutely.
Would you think hearing from other owners in a sharing type capacity would add value to your business and to you?
Absolutely.
Of course it would. Of course it would. So simple, right? Where is that?
Yeah.
Where is that? It's an honest question. It's an honest question. The problem is... No, go ahead.
I think, and that goes back to the old school way of thinking in our industry. And my dad was as paranoid as anybody sharing information with anybody. But I think, if you look out into other industries, a lot of times they work together, they collaborate together, share ideas, and that's how they evolve and grow. And I think that's where we need to be much better. And I'm not saying give away proprietary ideas, but working together is the only way that we're going to keep getting better.
But,
and I'll tell you a quick story. We had, we sent our marketing director to a marketing conference, and he said on one of the panels, it was from one of the bigger companies. They talked about all the metrics that they measure.
Mm-hmm.
They gathered some metrics and they said, I think we need to pull advertising from here. And the higher up said, no, we always advertise with them. That's not an option. And to me, that just says we're stuck in an old way of doing things. We're not even listening, to what the information is, what it's telling us.
No. And you go to the NSSF's YouTube page, for example, you look at a lot of the stuff that they have there, and none of it even makes sense. A lot of it's off topic. You look at much of the stuff they have up there, it's stuff that nobody cares about for the most part, and it doesn't cater to the audience that it should cater to. Like if I see one more video on clay targets, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind. And it's not, it just comes down to the evolution of media and how media has evolved and how media keeps changing. We're in a period where we're going to a place that if you're not innovating, you're dying. And if you're not getting and garnering the support of the different entities out there that can help you grow, as you're saying, and innovate and help pair you with better companies, you're failing, and you're failing tremendously. And I just look at it, and it's like, I wonder sometimes, it's almost like, what do they call it? The roosters running the hen house. Like, it's like there's no plan. And you just get that feeling. And if I'm getting that feeling, it's scary. Because I shouldn't be getting that feeling. And I know to you guys that pay a lot of dues and pay a lot of money, it's a scary time. This is the time now to harness it. This is the time to grow. This is the time to be pushing the national reciprocity issue. This is the time to be developing into the community that I know we can be. That's genuinely what I feel.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I also feel that this is a time, it's going to be easy for a lot of us to tell first-time gun owners that have always been maybe against it that I told you so. Mm-hmm. But it's not. We need to stay away from doing that, and we need to welcome them and show them the rope. Show them.
Yeah, it's about having an educated conversation, and I think
show them why this has always been so important to us.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, kind of back to what we talked about before, versus saying, yeah, I told you so. I told you you'd come around. Nobody wants to hear that.
Now I look at it as like uniting the clans. Like I'm in the tough spot where you have to understand my position. I'm trying myself as a personal mission, but I'm in a tough spot because I go to companies and I'm trying to get companies behind it, to support things like I'm doing. And it's hard. They all want to revert back to mag dumps in a desert. They all want to go back to that space because it's like a safe space for them. It's like, I want to go back to my safe space, and I have a hard time because I'm always like, you tell me you want to do this. You tell me this is the direction you want to go in. And, because we've talked about it offline, for what I do, even here on the show, I do my best to get voices on, to get people participating in the industry. I charge next to peanuts for the ads. People say, I love it. I'm in. I want to support it. Get them to support it. But then they revert back to mag dumps in a desert. Or hiring an ambassador and praying and not building out the programs for success over the long term.
And
it makes no sense.
And that's where, I go back to even like, even with our competitive shooters, we've been referencing Colby and Cheyenne. Yeah, it's great to have a quick video showing how well they shoot, but there's a million different versions of that all over the internet.
Oh, yeah.
It's more, to me, who they are and, what they can bring to the shooting sports versus how fast they can run 5 plates.
Which has a place, but...
It definitely has its place, and it's fun. I mean, which is great. But to, maybe the average person that isn't a competitive shooter, they may not fully grasp that.
Because it doesn't speak to them.
Correct. But if they can see those guys, and I think that's one reason Cheyenne's following grew so much, is she shows the fun side of her shooting. She shows the fun side of the lifestyle part of it. It's not all, this super serious. I guess what am I trying to say? It's not.
It's fun.
It's fun, yeah.
It's fun. How about that? It's fun. Because, you're getting to something that's important. It's because we can't, if I get one more email that says, be afraid, somebody's going to take something from you, send us money, be afraid. If I get one more thing that says that, and I know you know what I'm talking about, it's the fear mongering. Why don't we move past that? Let's move past that. Let's get past the fear.
Yes.
Let's get over that. Okay, we acknowledge that it might have been there, but let's get past fear. Why don't we do that? Why don't we get over fear? And why don't we make this more about something else? And that's part of the problem. That's part of the issue.
And that's where I feel like as an industry, we can be much more proactive at promoting the fun side of it, whatever aspect it is. Because you can only go so far promoting fear.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. 100%.
And I guess if somebody's not necessarily into firearms, promoting fear to them is not going to get them into firearms.
Mm-mm.
But promoting fun to them,
because it instantly feels like they need to join a cause. And people who are new to anything, like I know if I went to like a swimming lesson and Michael Phelps was teaching me, great. I have the best in the world teaching me. Awesome. Which is what you hope to see on any page. But the next thing I get hit with after the class is, you really need to join the Swimming Owners Action League. I'm going to be like, okay, I signed up for a lesson. I'm not quite ready for that kind of party. But, we can talk about it, maybe. But I'm instantly going to be turned off because it's too much too quick. So we dive right into the fear mongering, and we don't spend enough time developing the people, developing the leads, so to speak. And that's part of the problem.
Let people experience the fun. Let them, because even if I grew up in it, but back, I think you were talking earlier about it was always an experience that got somebody into firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, it wasn't, I'd say for most people, it wasn't fear. It was, their dad took them to a range and they realized how relaxing and, like almost like a bonding moment with their dad or their grandfather, whatever it may be. And I know a lot of people now, it allows them it's a break from normal stressors of daily life.
Mm-hmm.
You go to the range and everything that's bothering you back at home, back at the office, whatever it might be, simply goes away a lot of times for that hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is.
It's the how to fix it is the struggle. The how to fix it is where I struggle, and I lean on you guys. But, coming back to the brand and the things that you have going on and everything else, how are you as a brand gonna navigate these waters post coronavirus with all these people coming into it? What are some of your goals this year now, adjusted, of course? How are you going to navigate this?
We are going to, and we've already talked about this, we're putting more of our marketing budget into content creation of reaching these new shooters, of bringing them in, making them feel comfortable. And part of that will be videos. We're going to reach out to customers that are brand new into it and get their story, try to highlight some of that part of it. But then the other aspect is, and we've already talked about this as well, we were going this way before this whole pandemic hit, is the video section on our website. It was almost embarrassingly far behind what it needed to be. So we're doing everything from very simple tips and tricks to help people, very simple, how-to videos so people can do some of their own work. But even more importantly than that, we're doing a lot more of lifestyle type and mindset type videos of why we love what we do. Or not what we do, but the shooting sports as a whole.
Right.
And I think part of that comes from, some of the relationships we've built up with people, maybe not 100% in our industry, to reach some of those new shooters. I think we talked about it too. As an industry as a whole, we have to learn to market to those fringe customers. It's very easy to market to the diehard gun guy.
Yeah. No, totally.
The guy that's been shooting for 30 years, it's really easy to market to him. It's really easy to find him. But where do we find and how do we reach those people that are on the fringe?
Mm-hmm. Not an easy job.
A lot of what we're going to do is, obviously, once we can travel again, is we want to do a lot more events with our dealers, or events where people can come out and get a chance to shoot our stuff.
I think you just got to do it on your own. Yeah. I think you just got to, you can't rely on anybody at this point.
And that's a lot of it too, because, from a sales side, our best sales tool is once somebody gets a chance to shoot one of our guns. We can talk to them all day long about what we've done to it, what we, how we make the bolt, how we do all this, what we do to the triggers, but at a certain point that falls on deaf ears till they get a chance to try it. And then they can say, okay, this is why this is a $1,500 22 versus the $400 one at my local dealer. And honestly, what happens from there is word of mouth, which in my opinion is still probably the best form of advertising we can have. But it all comes down to, and like you said, maybe it's more, instead of us waiting to be invited to that event, we have to start doing more of the planning of the events and more of that on our own.
Right. I agree. I don't disagree.
And some of that is, and what we've been doing is we've been interjecting ourselves into different like lifestyle type events that may have a shooting component to it, but it may not be the primary focus. Like I mentioned on the phone the other day, we were part of Winter Strong, which is a fitness, shooting, archery, just basically an outdoor type thing, which would not have been a normal conventional event for probably a company to attend. But we went and, there was only, I think, 90 people there, but we were able to put our guns in front of people that had never shot before. It was an absolute blast.
And that's the Holy Grail.
So I think, long story short, to answer your question before, I think us trying to find more events like that where we can reach people who are open to the idea of shooting is where we find that next customer.
We could spend probably all day on this topic and go on and on and on. I want to get into really fast what you have going on this year in terms of what people can expect you innovating and coming out with and doing, and where it's going to go and what your expectations are for the brand.
We have a couple new products that we are developing. What we're really wanting to start incorporating is we have our Summit, which is our straight pull takedown system that we're going to be launching into several different calibers, but then we're also going to develop that into like a takedown system that's been requested by a lot of customers. So that is one area we're focusing on. The other area is taking our pistol design and possibly looking at different calibers there as well. But it's tough because right now we're staying, people always ask when we're going to branch off from rimfires, but we have so much left in the rimfire market that we want to do that we just haven't had time to do yet.
Right.
So and it seems like the takedown market is one area that it keeps coming up over and over again. We have our Black Mamba pistol that we build. We have a new version of that coming out in April. And then there's a couple other things that I can't necessarily talk about yet, but we hope to have ready by SHOT Show.
What can't you talk about? Let me ask you this. Is there anything larger caliber, or I should say large caliber, in the works?
So for about 10 years, we built, maybe a little bit more than that, we built what was called our Evolution rifle, which was available in 223 and 204. And it looked more like a sporting rifle than like an AR style rifle. But the downside was it was extremely heavy. It weighed over 10 pounds. And even though we advertised it as over 10 pounds, once guys got it, a lot of them called and said, that's way heavier than I expected. So we are in the process of redesigning that in a couple different areas, because there's a lot of new calibers out there that we can approach that were not around when we originally did 204. So that is one area we're looking at getting back into, in that it's always tempting to get into the AR market, but at the same time, we try to stay in our lane with what we're doing and what we know. And so we really haven't made a decision whether we're going to branch out into that AR market. I know that's not a great answer.
The AR market, as I said, is something I think, in pockets can be successful. And it's been overdone. That's part of the reason why I take the stance I take with folks all the time regarding, stop making it about the gun. Like if I see one more video about how this AR is going to change the world, it's totally different. It's been done, redone, cooked, recooked, overcooked, baked, and fried. And I think that if you do break into it, it has to be from the standpoint of we're, Volquartsen, and we're doing something really cool and different for our customers and our clients that we want to take to the next level, and we want to be really exciting, and do it in a limited capacity. I'm trying to choose my words judiciously, and do it in a way that it's your spin on it and it's for your customer, if you catch my drift. And not say,
and that's exactly the way it would have to be.
Yeah, and not say we're doing this because we think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We did this for our customer.
Yeah, because I think so many people fall in the trap of getting into the AR market strictly from chasing money. And that's not really how we've ever done anything. And like you said, it has to be for the right reasons, and it has to be marketed to our customer, not just as adding it as a SKU because that's what everybody else is doing. And to be honest, there is something, with us having done rimfires almost exclusively outside of the 223 and the 204 for the last 25 plus years, there's something to be said as, without trying to, brag on our own company, but there's something to be said as the go-to company for rimfires.
And once you become the go-to entity, that speaks back to everything I'm talking about, in general, with whether it's the NSSF, whether it's the NRA, any entity, anything. You want to be the conduit. The minute your phone stops ringing, that's when you got to worry.
Yes.
So I love it. Scott, let everybody know where they can find you, where they can track you down, and where they can reach out to you. Because we'll go on all day here. Forget it.
The best place is probably our website, which is just Volquartsen.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Volquartsen Firearms. On Facebook, it's Volquartsen Custom, because if we change it to Volquartsen Firearms, it restricts anybody under 18 from being able to see it, which is crazy in its own right.
Now,
and then on YouTube, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, best way to reach you is going to be through customer service portal. Contact us.
Yes, through the website, just that customer service at Volquartsen.com.
And I'll put all the links below.
And and I try to handle as many emails as I possibly can. So, but the best way to reach me is probably through my Instagram page, which is just Scott Volquartsen.
Well, listen, I could shower you with compliments. It wouldn't do you any it wouldn't do you any justice. I think you're an innovator. I think you're one of the great guys of the business. I've said that from afar for a long time. We've had the chance to probably talk now 3-4 hours on total, I'd say. I think from afar, I've always admired the things you're doing and the team you're putting together and how you structure your business. And I think it's phenomenal. And I think you have a real chance to do something exciting in that space and continue to proliferate. Whether or not you choose to do that's going to be up to you. But I think you have a real chance here to do something amazing. I think there's so much ground you can cover in what you've built, because it's it's rare to see somebody come into a space, own it, crush it, bring in the right people, the right ambassadors, the right influencers, the right structure, and hit a home run from all sides of the plate. So I thank you for that. I'm going to put all your links down below in this conversation to find you.
Well, I appreciate that. We still feel like we have a long ways to go, so we're going to keep working.
And that's what's going to make you great, is feeling like you're always taking the monkey off your back, so to speak. But I think we're in interesting times. I value your insight as a leader in the community, as someone who's thought out of the box. And I look forward to the things that you do. And I'm hoping at one of these events or something, we get a chance to sit down and rap a little bit more.
Yeah, that'd be great. I look forward to it.
Absolutely. So, for me and all you guys out there, I want to thank all the sponsors. I want to take a minute and thank Scott for taking the time. It's amazing to get to talk with these guys, and it truly is a pleasure of mine. And if you get a chance, click some of the links below and go ahead and leave reviews, and head over to www.johnbartoloshow.com for the list of show sponsors and support them. And I appreciate everybody, and I appreciate Scott's time.
Well, thank you, John.